So welcome, dear friends. I'm John, Father John Deere, and welcome to this Beatitude Center Zoom session with our very special guest today, my friend, Dr. Jim Finley. You can find many other great upcoming Zooms at www.beatitudecenter.org. Let me just remind folks who are here to mute yourselves and to, if you have any questions for Jim, write them in the chat link. Jim will speak for 50 to 60 minutes, I hope, and then we'll open up for questions and comments and end at the hour-and-a-half mark. And later we will send out the Zoom recording link. So I always like to begin with a little prayer. So I just invite everybody, wherever you are, let's just take a moment of silence. You can just take a deep breath if you'd like and relax and notice how you're feeling and recenter yourselves. And I invite everyone to enter into the presence of the God of peace who loves you infinitely and personally and wildly, and everyone everywhere too. Let's welcome the risen nonviolent Jesus into our hearts and just take a moment to ask for whatever grace of peace, hope, and love we need to live out his beatitudes and do God's will. Beloved God, thank you for all the blessings of life, love, and peace that you give us. Be with us now as we reflect with our friend Jim on the mystical depths of peace and universal love and nonviolence, that we might better follow the nonviolent Jesus and do your will. Bless us, disarm us, heal us, inspire us, and enlighten us and strengthen us that we might go forward and do our part to help end violence and poverty, racism, greed, war, injustice, authoritarianism, nuclear weapons, environmental destruction, that we might better do your will and be the people you created us to be, your beatitude people, your holy peacemakers, followers of the nonviolent Jesus. In his name we pray, amen. So welcome again, dear friends. I'm very happy to welcome back to the Beatitude Center today my friend, Dr. Jim Finley, one of the world's greatest and most beloved teachers on mysticism and prayer. Jim was a novice and student of Thomas Merton at the Abbey of Gethsemane and then became a clinical psychologist. Today, he's a very popular faculty member at the Living School at the Center for Action and Contemplation with our friend Father Richard Rohr, and Jim hosts a wildly popular podcast called Turning to the Mystics, which has 750,000 students. And he's the author of several bestsellers, including Merton's Palace of Nowhere, one of the best books ever about Thomas Merton, The Awakening Call, The Contemplative Heart, and his recent best-selling memoir, The Healing Path. Some of you may have been here a few years ago when Jim was first on the Beatitude Center, and I asked him under the title to talk about the mystical depths of nonviolence. We've since opened up a lot of the old Zoom presentations are now free on the Beatitude Center YouTube channel, which you can all go and look at. It's free. You just have to type in your name or something like that, maybe your email. And Jim has thousands of people have listened to it. That presentation by Jim was so beautiful that I transcribed it and Jim went over it and we published it in Father Richard Rohr's beautiful theology journal, which you all may not know about. It's called Oneing, O-N-E. And I think they only do 2 a year, but they pick one word. So, they've had words like grief or liminal space. And so around that time, they asked Richard and Vanessa at the Center for Action and Contemplation, asked me to help edit a special one on nonviolence. So I have here the Zoom text from Jim Lawson and all kinds of people, Daniel Berrigan, Joan Baez, Richard Rohr, Shane Claiborne. But it ends with the text of Jim's talk on the mystical depths of nonviolence. And it's the only place you can get it. and you can order it on the CAC website, cac.org, and go to the bookstore. And this is a beautiful book on nonviolence. So I was hoping Jim would just keep talking and kind of further unpack the mystical depths of peace, love, and nonviolence. And so we're all ears, Jim. Thank you so much for joining us. Dear friends, join me in giving a very big, warm Beatitude Center welcome to Dr. Jim Finley. Jim, you're here among friends. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, you pressed something. You were better
Oh,
before.
wait a minute. Can you hear me now? No?
Better, yeah.
Is it okay?
Even better, yeah. The
Okay, good.
louder, the better. Great.
Good, good.
Thank
And if it's, let me go up even more. So if you, at any point you can't hear me, let me know, but we're
I
good
will.
now.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's
good.
great.
Okay, very good. So, yeah, so first of all, uh, I'm grateful that John asked me to come back, and I look forward to our time together. And um, what I think in a broad sense, I was thinking about this. I think when I teach, my intention and my hope is to help people be encouraged and insightful as to how they can live a more contemplative way of life in the midst of the world. And I think by contemplative way of life, we might say it's a way of life in which we learn from God how to find, how to seek and to find and to give ourselves to God, who's wholly poured out and given to us in each passing moment of our life, on up to and including the moment of our death and beyond. So, and the monastery is carefully crafted to protect that way of life. But Merton said there are people living in the world who are being drawn into the divinity of the ordinariness of ourself, and they have no one to help them understand what's happening to them. So I think when I teach, that's my underlying intention, whatever the specific approach might be. And uh, I want to say too, this talk that I'm giving, I first gave it, I think, 10 years ago at St. Barnabas of the Desert Church in Phoenix, Arizona, an Anglican church. It's on the internet. And I'm going to be giving it again live at St. Monica's Church on December 13th. And I have 3 hours. I have longer, so I'll be refining it more this way. So I'm kind of resurrecting this poetic exploration and kind of teasing it out. I just feel drawn to do it. So that's what we're doing. My approach is this, is that we learn to live a contemplative way of life by learning to be more contemplatively present to the presence of God in the ordinariness of our days. And that's what I'd like to reflect on. And I want to reflect on a certain moment. Namely, I want to reflect on a moment in which a young woman is holding her newborn infant. But I want to make clear, as I'll also including at the end, I'll be talking about death. We can also be talking about uh, uh, service to the community or uh, walking bravely with a terminal diagnosis or being a poet or an artist or a musician or the, the call to silence or to solitude, any modality that in which we're being quickened from within with the presence of God in the immediacy of our day by day life, and then being called to be faithful to it. So I'm going to choose this moment of this young woman holding her firstborn infant in her arms. I'm going to poetically meditate on the moment. Uh, Begin first by saying that she's holding her infant in her arms. She's first taken by, if you hear the noise in the background, it's raining outside. And that's the rain coming down off the roof. So, anyways, um, she's really struck by how small her infant is, like weighing hardly anything at all. It's like an experiential sense of just being taken by that. And also, as she holds her infant, She's struck by how limited her infant is in almost every way possible to think about. Her infant can't feed herself. Her infant can't roll over by itself. Her infant can't dress itself. Her infant can't sit up, get out of bed, and walk around. Her infant can't talk to her this way. Matter of fact, her infant, as she gazes into its unknowing eyes, and the infant's gazing at her, the infant doesn't know who she is. The infant doesn't know that it's her mother. And the infant doesn't know who it is. Its own sense of a person hasn't emerged yet into consciousness. So we might also say she has a sense that the infant that she's holding is the essence of limit. This is very significant as we reflect on Advent and Mary with the infant Jesus. That Jesus is this incarnate presence in what I'm talking about now. And it's where all of us, where our life began, this way, this infancy. And yet, and here's the deeper part that kind of surprises her. And yet, with the imperial strength with which her infant clasped her extended little finger, like a king or queen holding a scepter, it all but carries her heart away. She knows that if she were to die in attempting to save the life of this infant, she would die in the truth. And that is, she's so taken by how limitless the infant is in its limits. And this realization, this where she's struck by the limitless nature of its limits, she's like interiorly struck by it. She realizes, but she knows not what to make of it. Like uh, she can't comprehend it. And she's in a contemplative state. She's not in a logical state. She's not in the midst of something she can define. She can't define it. It's not definable. She can't explain it. It's not explainable. It's intimately realizing what she cannot comprehend in a contemplative moment holding her infant, like the holiness of that. I'd like to go a little deeper into it as we explore this. Um, she realizes as she's holding her infant that her infant is revealing her to herself as capable of realizing that. And as her own heart is being kind of expanded in a realization of an efficacy, of a realization of the holiness of the unexplainable that's revealing her to herself as capable of experiencing that. And uh, what's also significant for her, and I think for all of us, this is key, although she's being moved by the experience, to a great extent, she's not consciously aware in reflective consciousness of the depth of the experience that she's having. T.S. Eliot said, "We had the experience, but we missed the meaning." You know, a lot of psychotherapy is somebody helping us to be more consciously aware of the implications of what we just said. We say it like we're so in the stream of seeing it. There's someone, they keep inviting us to stop and say again at the feeling level what we just said. It's almost like an intimate way of showing up in the presence of ourselves this way. So we might say in this moment, she's a mystic in the making, really. She's a mystic in the making, and the intimacy of the unfolding of uh, uh, this utterly ordinary moment this way in her life. I want to add another dimension to this. Uh, just a minute, I got to get my earpiece fell out. Affect your ability to hear me or not, but to be safe. Now the other one fell out. Just don't. Okay. There's a developmental psychologist named Winnicott, and he did early infant development, like child development, object constancy, and different things. He has a very poetic statement, which I want to apply here to us, to this woman, to us, Jesus. He says, the mother holds her little infant, and as the days and weeks go by, as she's gazing into its unknowing eyes, there's a very first moment her infant looks back at her. He says, in this moment, they're alone together. They're alone together. If this moment would never happen, the infant could not emerge in this distinctness of who it's called to be as a person. And yet, if it had to risk its symbiotic communion with her to be distinct from her, it couldn't risk it. There has to be kind of like the dowry of a child's being. It has to know that it can emerge in its distinction from her without losing the symbiotic communal oneness with her. And I think this is a poetic way to look at how God sees us, that when God eases us onto the earthly plane, he finds the place on earth that's most like paradise, and it's the mother's gaze. Because we're called to realize that we're distinct from God, but we're to be distinct from God without losing our eternal oneness with God, hidden with Christ and God before the origins of the universe. So this transsubjective communion. Merton says, when Jesus says I and I say I, it's the same I of the order of grace and love. And we emerge in our distinctness without losing the oneness. But here's the dilemma. This is the mystery of the fall. We're living in a traumatized capacity to experience the oneness that alone is ultimately real. We so spin out in the centrifugal force of the day's demands. We get so spin out as if we're autonomously real all by ourselves. And we lose experiential oneness with the infinite love of God welling up and giving the infinity of itself away as our very life this way. And so we're trying to reflect here poetically on the kind of the layered subtleties of our life and this poetic reflection on this moment of our life. Now imagine the child. As the weeks and months and years go by, the child gets up and walks the ground, goes through its developmental stages, goes to kindergarten, grade school. The child graduates from high school. And here's the child's autonomous life. The child goes off to college, maybe, maybe not. Goes to college somewhere nearby so that the child can still live at home, maybe, maybe not. Maybe the child goes somewhere across the country somewhere. The child majors in English, maybe not, or French, maybe not, or mathematics, maybe not. And while in college, the child this young woman meets someone and falls in love, or maybe not. Gets married, maybe not. Has a child, or one or two or three, or maybe not. Life rolls on. But here's the thing. The child and its mother, they stay close. That's the point. They are endearing to each other, which often doesn't happen. So they so treasure the ongoing nearness and dearness as they go through their passage of, uh, of time this way in the closeness. And in the big arc of time, in the big arc of time, it comes to pass that that woman who is holding her little infant is now in hospice. And this little baby that she was holding is an adult woman sitting next to her bed in a chair. And the woman is looking at her mother lying there in the bed, and she's struck by how limited her mother is. Her mother can't feed herself. Her mother can't roll over by herself. Her mother can't dress herself. The mother can't sit up and look around. The mother can't talk to her. As a matter of fact, and my wife Maureen died of dementia 3 years ago. She died right here in the living room. Maybe her mother doesn't even know who she is. Doesn't even know she's looking at her own daughter anymore. As a matter of fact, maybe through dementia, the mother, she doesn't know who she is either. And it is in some sense then that the mother has become the essence of limit. And yet the daughter's sitting real close to the mother, and she has her hand out like this, and her dying mother is holding her extended little finger. And yet with the imperial strength with which her dying mother is holding her extended little finger, she all but carries her heart away. She knows in some unexplainable way that although the mother is dying, surely dying, the mother is dying, but the mother is eternal because nobody dies. It's like a moment of realizing the eternality of ourselves that never passes away, this endlessly ribbon through the passage of time, in which everything is endlessly passing away this way. And she knows not what to make of it. She knows not what to make of it. And in this sense, she's touched with the mystical. This sense is so poignant and tender, but we're putting words to something here. It's hard to find words for it because of the intimacy of it. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross did years ago did a lot of research on the stages of dying. And she said when the person first gets a terminal diagnosis where they realize they're going to die, there's denial, and then there's anger. Then there's bargaining. They try to make a bargain with God. Honestly, if you let me live and save my life, I promise I'll listen to John Deere's podcast every week. And then when the promise doesn't work, there's anger. And then the person goes into depression. And she said, this is the ego coming to the end of itself. She says, but some people come to acceptance. And she says, what acceptance is freedom from the tyranny of death in the midst of death. So when you look into the eyes of the dying loved one, it's the gate of heaven. It's the eternality of ourself as the beloved that never dies this way. So we might say then for us, now I'm thinking of Advent and Jesus, that in Bethlehem, in Bethlehem, um, Mary, when the angel appeared to Mary, Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee, to be the mother of Jesus. This way, be it done unto me according to thy word. I think when we reflect on our faith, it helps us to see that Jesus reveals us to ourselves this way. Because what are our angelic visitations? An angelic visitation is a quickening in our heart, where we feel called to live in fidelity to the awakening that sets us on a path. This is given to us, for John Deere, a path of nonviolence. For me, it was nonviolence too, but in a different sense. I'm a trauma survivor. And for 30 years, I worked with trauma survivors who wanted spirituality to be resourced in their therapy. It was like an ongoing, just sitting all day long with these people going through this mysterious intimacy of this transformation. And so everyone has their own walk, their own way. It's the gift of the poet. Rilke, Letters to a Young Poet, is a famous passage where Rilke was already a famous poet at this point, and some person sent Rilke some of his poetry and said, would you read my poetry and let me know if they're any good? And Rilke wrote back, he said, you're looking outward now. You must not do that. You must ask yourself in the stillest hour of your darkest night, must I write poetry? If the answer is a clear and simple yes, you must build your whole life in fidelity to that imperative, to this way. When we look at life this way, too, by the way, at this level, we can kind of see we tend not to be aware of ourselves at this level. And life's hard out here. You get the feeling of just trying to keep up with the momentum of the day's demands. You know what life is like. You get this feeling that you're skimming across the depths of your own life, and you're suffering from depth deprivation. It's a depth that you know is there because you've experienced it. In holding the child, or sitting next to the dying parent, or lying in the dark listening to your heartbeat, or the rain coming down, or giving yourself over to the smell of a blood-red rose, or seeing somebody on the street and stopping to ask them, are you okay? It's really. And so it's almost like we're kind of get caught. See, why do I let the centrifugal force of the day's demands keep me spinning out and away from this unexplainable communion that alone is ultimately real? This is the seeker's question. How is it that I'm not at home in my own home? Why is it that I'm living at the edge of myself? I'm kind of exiled from the divinity of myself that I know is real because from time to time it graces my heart and it gives itself to me. And in these moments of grace, there's this intuition. It isn't something more is given, but rather a curtain parts, and we fleetingly experience the divinity of every moment of our life, including this moment. Jesus said, "You have eyes to see and you do not see." There's your God-given capacity to see your God-given godly nature. And from time to time you see it, it flashes forth. Lying alone in the dark in the arms of the beloved, reading a child a good night story, looking out the window, it grants and it gives itself from time, like there it is again, there it is again, there it is again, this way. And yet it's elusive unto me, this way. And, um, and so what we see here then, when we look at the big picture of life this way, so here we are in infancy, we go through all of our days like a big arc, like a big circle. And in the end, it ends in death. And where do birth and death touch each other? This way. So, for example, all of us were born, otherwise we couldn't be here. But guess what? Because we were all born, we're dying. 100 years from now, every one of us here will be dead. We're melting like candles. Very, very soon, we won't even be here anymore. Seriously. 1,000 years from now, we'll have been dead for over 900 years. 1,000,000 years from now, we'll be dead 1,000,000 years. So take notes. I hope this is clear. So here's the question. Can I, in the fleetingness of my life, like a flame that flickers in the wind, taste within myself the eternality of God being poured out and given to me that never passes away, ribbon through everything passing away? And here's what's interesting about Jesus in our exile. Says, Jesus did not consider his equality with God a condition to be clung to, but he emptied himself, taking the form of a servant. And so the love of God revealed in Jesus is that the love of God descends as low as it needs to go to find us where we're lost in our own life. And it meets us there. I see you, dear one, and I'm here for you. This is so interesting about Jesus. When you look at the miracle stories of Jesus in the Gospels, really, each one is different in a way. Each one is different, but in a way they're all alike. See that Jesus spent whole nights in prayer. He who sees me sees the Father, this oneness. And Jesus came out into the light of day and walked the earth looking to set people free from suffering. And when the word got out, the suffering came to him. I can't walk. I can't see. I have leprosy. I become a prostitute. I become a it goes on and on and on. And what's so stunning about when you really look at the miracle stories, this is the divinity of nonviolence, too, I think. When you really look at the divinity, it's what's so stunning about it. All the stories are alike in this sense. Jesus, here's the person standing there, the leper or the prostitute or whatever it is. And Jesus sees that the depths of their suffering isn't that they have leprosy, isn't they become a prostitute, or isn't they can't walk. The depth of their suffering is they think they are what's wrong with them. See, they think that their woundedness and their deprivation has the authority to name who they are. It's almost like the kind of an idolatry of conditioned states over the infinite love that's infinitely in love with us in the midst of our conditioned states. Do I put my faith in my ability to finally measure up to who I believe God's calling me to be, or I put my faith in God that's infinitely in love with me and my inability to live up to who I'm called to be? Because the mercy of God is oceanic, boundaryless in all directions, divine, eternal, and free. So here's the real miracle in the healing stories. I'm so touched by this too as a psychotherapist working with trauma, like the intimacy of pain in the world. Jesus, and this is between them. I want to say it poetically between them. So this is the person standing there. And Jesus first heals their physical, their ailment in a miraculous way. The lame walk, the blind see, and so on. And then he says this, I did this that you might believe the real miracles. So here's the real miracle. Jesus is standing there with this person who's just being healed. And this is between them. And Jesus says to the person, I know you. From before the origins of the universe, God the Father contemplated you and me, hidden with Christ and God before the origins of the universe. This is the you that was never born, because God has never, 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 never not known who you are in me, called to share in God's own life as God shares in it as the beloved. And the you that was never born is you that will never die. And they're reflected in his eyes. They see their true face, experiential salvation. Soren Kierkegaard, he talks about coming to the edge of yourself, like you're just at your wit's end. You don't know what to do next. Oh, like it's over for me, like this. And he said, you make a leap of faith, and in the free fall, you're caught by Christ, and reflected in his eyes, you see his true face. There's no fear there. Jesus said, you have eyes to see, but you don't see. So you don't see the God-given divinity of yourself, infinitely in love with you in the unresolved matters of your heart. This is the source of all your fear. This is the source of all your confusion. This is the source of all the traumatizing things that you do to yourself and to each other. This way, Lord, that I might see. Lord, that I might see. This great inner seeing of our heart. Imagine you get a phone call from somebody. Years ago, you graduated from high school. Haven't heard from them in years. And the person says, I'm in town. It'd be fun to get together and catch up with each other. So you're delighted to be with this person. You're sharing what's happened with each other over your life over the years. And let's say you have been blessed with many years in a very deep, loving, committed relationship with someone. This just literally transformed your life. And you start telling the person about this relationship. You show them their picture, how you met, what the qualities of the person are, and your friend's listening. And the person says to you, I don't want to know that. What I want to know is who do you know this person is in your love for the person? And you don't know what to say, and your heart breaks when you try. And you're so grateful for having been rendered whole by having your heart broken by love. You can't live on your own terms. Merton once said we should all get down on our knees right now, and and thank God we can't live the way we want to, because it's the infinite welling up and drawing us unexplainably to itself in the midst. It's almost, I say this in trauma, it's almost like the ragged edges of the hurting place are the configurations through which the light of grace shines into our heart unexplainably. This is a gift of tears. This is experiential salvation. So this is so interesting. See, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. It doesn't say the Word became humanity and dwelt among us, but rather Jesus meets us in the wounded place itself. See, when I'm talking like this poetically, there's that in us that sees this, like we poetically resonate with it. But there's also in each one of us, there's that in us that doesn't see it yet. It's the part that is still reactive. It's the part that still thinks the outcome of the situation has the authority to name who we are. That. And what's very interesting is Jesus meets us in that part of us, not the part that gets it. And so I get it, I get it, I get it, I get it. But there's that in me that still doesn't get it. How? There's that in me that still gets reactive, still gets filled with shame, still gets imagining the outcome of the situation as Bob, you know what it's like. So what is our task? The part of us that gets it is to be endlessly tender-hearted toward the part that doesn't get it yet. I see you, dear one, and I'm here for you. Then you're Christ to yourself. I say in them when I was sharing the Merton material, but St. Paul talks about the thorn in the flesh, and he doesn't tell us what it is, but it's the stumbling place, like that fault that he can't quite get over. So let's say everyone has a thorn in the flesh. I have mine, you have yours. We could all share our thorn in the flesh. It's personal. It's not advice. Let's say your thorn in the flesh is anger. You're quick to anger, and you're working on it, been working on it, and you feel badly about it every time you do it. And you learn to apologize. You just can't get over it. And imagine you're in hospice, in a hospital, and you're dying. Your last act on this earth is you throw a bedpan and then you die. This is regrettable. Provided you're sorry that you threw it, and you're sorry because you could have hit somebody. What really matters is this. Do you know in your heart that God's infinitely in love with people who don't throw bedpans, and God's infinitely in love with people who do? Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. You know, it says Jesus hanging on the cross. When Jesus died, they pierced his heart with a lance, and blood and water flowed out like at the birth of a child, which is us, ecclesia, the church. Then there was no more Jesus left in Jesus. And when there was no more Jesus left in Jesus, the only Jesus that was ever really there is manifested throughout the world to this day. And Jesus says, come follow me. What is the mystery of the cross? For really, what is the cross? What is the cross in this poetic sense of the cross? The cross is the crucifixion of our cherished and dreaded illusions that anything less than an infinite union with the infinite love of God will be enough to put to rest the restless longings of our heart. And here's something else, it's the cross. The cross is the death of imagining that any shortcoming on our part is more powerful and more real than the infinite oceanic mercy that's taking us to itself in the midst of our fragility, deeply accepted or not accepted. This is the gift of tears. This is experiential salvation. And this is the essence of nonviolence. Because there's no one to be violent against. This way. God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten son. There's a scripture scholar who wrote a book called Meeting Jesus Again for the First Time. I can't think of his name. Um, uh, he Anyway, he did a biblical study on the last week of Jesus' life this way, and on the Last Supper. By the way, you know, at the Last Supper, you read the Gospel of John, this extraordinary love language at the Last Supper. So at the Last Supper, there was a traitor at the table. Things weren't off to a good start. So unless we get disheartened, it's always been this way when you look at it like this. And he says uh, that and Jesus with the scourging of the pillar and the crowning of thorns and so on. He said to realize that Judas and Peter both committed the same sin. See, they both betrayed Christ. Peter was so crushed by the weight of what he did, he went out and took his own life. Peter was so crushed by what he did, he wept. And Jesus met him, Peter, head of the church. You're head of, we're a community of infinitely love broken people. This way, the ecclesia. And the temptation of the church for the seduction of empire, turning it into a set of answers or a system or whatever, this endless seduction, like the prophetic voice that constantly shines a light on that within ourselves and in the world this way. So, here's a contemplative way of life. But here's a question. What's interesting is these quickening moments that happen, and they happen in hundreds of ways. We can't make these quickening moments happen, and they tend to dissipate as quickly as they came. The cell phone goes off, you know what it's like. So since we can't make the infinite, these fleeting moments of grace happen, the quickening, or put it another way, insofar as you're in the poetic flow of this reflection, when the reflection is over, chances are you won't stay so serene through the rest of the day. Chances are. You know why? Because you can't find your damn cell phone, you know, or the door won't open. You know what life is like. You know, I'm like this, you're like this. So since we can't make the moment last because we slip back into the foibles, what can we do? We can't make it last, but we can assume the inner stance that offers the least resistance to be overtaken by what we cannot attain. And that's the rendezvous with God in practice. Lovers cannot make their moments of oceanic oneness happen, but together they learn the stance that offers the least resistance to being overtaken one more time by the oceanic oneness that gives meaning to everything they do in their life together day by day. Poets can't make the poems happen, But together they take that stance that offers the least resistance to which poetry flows into the world. Those committed to healing can make healing happen, but they learn that stance that offers the least resistance to the flowing act of healing, like channeling the healing event in our heart this way. And that's practice. It's like a rendezvous. Meditation is any act faithfully entered into with your whole heart that takes you to the deeper place. The long, slow walk to no place in particular. Getting up on purpose before dawn and sitting alone in the dark is the primordial event of the emergence of a new day. The pause between two lines of a poem. Being faithfully present to a loved one who's dying, or being courageously walking your walk in your own terminal diagnosis. Whatever it is that and so you have to go, you have to sit with it. And we're doing it right now. This is what we're doing right now. We do it first as Lectio Divina, meditation and prayer. Lectio is, see, Lectio, the ladder to heaven, and turning to the Mystics podcast, we do the ladder to heaven, we go the second. What is Lectio Divina? It's the first rung of the ladder to heaven. It's sustained receptivity to a beauty not yet thought about. So Merton says you go to your place of prayer, you sit and you remind her, he said the guidelines for prayer is one, be sincere, because with God a little sincerity goes a long, long way. Sit there knowing that to understand with God is to realize that you're infinitely understood. It's also to realize and remind yourself that you belong to God, because God freely chooses to belong to you. And in that sincerity, you open the Gospels or the teachings of a mystic. You find a teacher whose voice, Zen Master Dogen says, find that person whose words awaken your heart with a desire for the great way. That's your teacher. So you hear a voice, and even before you think about it, you already know that it's beautiful, and your heart knows it's beautiful because it's true. Lectio Divina is sustained receptivity. Hear, O Israel. Listen. Listen to this. Next, in the listening, so God, we hear God's voice speaking to us in the poet or the mystic or the Gospels or whatever the text is, whatever it is. Then God says, in effect, I talk to you, no, you talk to me. Where are you at with this? So discursive meditation is a loving dialogue. This is where you might journal it out. You have to sign off on it. Like, where are you at with this? Seriously, this way. And God says to you, no, um, I just love it when we talk like this. I hope this is as good for you as it is for me, because I'm into you. And in the sincerity of you sharing with me this, we're one with each other. So Jesus says, for example, do not be afraid, I'm with you always. Notice Jesus doesn't say, don't be afraid because I'll personally see to it that nothing unfair happens to you. I'll personally see to it that nothing cruel. Look what happened to him. Rather, no matter what happens to you, don't be afraid because I'm one with you in it. And so let's say that's our text. And so you say to Jesus, wait, but Jesus, you were afraid. In the Garden of Gethsemane, you sweat blood, PTSD. You saw execution. It was a horrible torture. You were afraid. Or are you telling me not to be afraid of being afraid? Are you telling me that you're somehow unexplainably riven through my fear itself, sustaining me in my fear and guiding me in it toward a better place this way? And so there's Lectio Divina, the discursive meditation, then prayers from the heart. Help me with this. I can't deepen your infinite oneness with me unless you deepen it. And you ask God for the grace not to break the thread of that sincerity as you go through your day. So you blow out your candle and you get up, you head out the door. As you go through the day, the thread breaks many times. You get reactive, rush hour, whatever. But here's the key. No matter how many times the thread breaks from your end, it never breaks from God's end. Because God's, God's love for you is sovereign, invincible, riven through and through your wayward ways this way. And you learn to deepen that. Next, it can go deeper as a contemplation. where it falls into wordlessness. You're sitting there this way, and each mystic talks about this turning in different ways. And it falls into kind of it's like a moment quietly resting in God, resting in you unexplainably forever, and you rest in it. These moments of wordless contemplation can be quite intense, really, but often they're extremely subtle, like a whisper, where they're very delicate. If we weren't careful, we would have walked right past it. And so and the turning to the mystics, this is what they're all trying to help us with. These mystic teachers, they're trying to help us with this, like the artistry of listening to the subtlety of this. And I'd like to end with uh, this image about teaching. We'll have a dialogue, we'll have a chat. When I was at the monastery for 6 years, I was fortunate to have Thomas Merton as my spiritual director, as novice master. I saw him as a living mystic teacher. And he introduced me, I was 18 years old when I went right out of high school. And he introduced me to the mystics, John of the Cross and Teresa and Eckhart and all these people. It had a very deep effect on me. And I also had a chance to study medieval philosophical theology from Father Dan Walsh. And Dan Walsh taught philosophy at Columbia University. And medieval philosophy, and he taught Thomas Merton. Thomas Merton was sitting on his classes. He was very influential in Merton's conversion to the church. And then he came to Gethsemane and he taught the monks uh, uh, studying for ordination to the priesthood, Dan Walsh. And so it was Duns Scotus and Bonaventure and Augustine and Aquinas and so on. And it also deeply affected me, metaphysics. And so when I left the monastery, got married, had 2 small children, I wrote a book called Merton's Palace of Nowhere. It took 5 years to write it. And it's Merton's insights as a spiritual life of being healed from what hinders us from realizing our ultimate identity hidden with Christ and God forever. That was the book. But I was having a hard time writing it. I found it I'd get up every morning at 5 o'clock and I'd sit there. And so I wrote a letter to Dan Walsh, who was still living at the time at the monastery. I said, I'm writing this book about the ultimate identity, the true self, that we subsist in God like light subsists in flame. And I don't know how to communicate this to people out here. And Dan Walsh wrote back to me. He said, you cannot communicate it, but it will communicate itself through you if you're convinced in what you say and if you are what you say. And you know it'll be communicating itself because of a response in the listener. They'll know something very deep inside of them that matters very much is being addressed. Merton called this spiritual communication. It's like a communal event in the room and what no one in the room can explain this way. And it gave me the courage, like the poetic voice. That's how I try to teach. Right now I feel called to do it. And so in my life see, where are you planted right now? You're in the midst of the divinity of your situation. I'm in the midst of mine. So for years I went through trauma at home, and then there was these mystical awakenings at the monastery. I was sexually abused by monks there. I had a breakdown. I had to leave. I got into a marriage that just fell apart. It was a horrible mess. It was a horrible, painful thing. I wrote Merton's Palace of Nowhere, and I was a high school religion teacher. And a psychologist read Merton's Palace. He said, if you commit yourself to exploring the contribution of the mystical traditions to the science of psychology, I'll see to it that you can have a PhD in clinical psychology with family support for free, just as a pure gift. So I went to Fuller Theological Seminary for 5 years and studied in-depth clinical psychology and trauma, and changed my whole life. My marriage fell apart. I met Maureen, and she was a therapist. We lived here together for 30 years. It's so stunning. She died here this way. And so what is my situation now? My situation now is I'm 82 years old, and I'm alone here in this house, this place. And I'll tell you a little piece of my life, because it's always personal. Well, the ocean's right outside the window. We just sit at sunset every night and watch the sun go down. We call it muffin hour, because she used to call me Love Muffin. So we had muffin hour. She was in AA for years, so she'd have iced tea and I'd have a glass of whiskey or wine. And I had my pen out, I'd be writing this way. And she would say to me, it was like a ritual. She'd say, I'm going to go in now. The bedroom would come in, I'd fix dinner, and we'd have dinner together. And I said, and I was always right in the middle of a deep insight in my writing. Like, this is what my notes look like. Kind of crazy. And, uh, and so I said, I'll be in 5 minutes. And about 20 minutes later, she'd come out pointing to her wristwatch, going, like you're 20 minutes late. And she would always interrupt me at the edge of a deep thought. And I'd put the cap on my fountain pen and I would think to myself, if the day comes and you die before I do, I'd give anything to have you come out here and interrupt me. And that day has come. I sit out there every night and watch the sun go down this way. And I raise my glass of wine, whatever it is, and here's my toast. I say, all you angels and saints, if Maureen is not yet in the fullness of the depths of God, carry her into that fullness. And Maureen, my love, whether you're still in the ark of your homecoming, and what a homecoming it must be, or in the fullness of God, I know you're one with me, and I'm one with you in the deathless nature of our love in God that's eternal. And I to the path, and I toast and take my first sip of the path, and I come in and have dinner and I go to bed. That's how I end my day. And so I write 8 hours a day. I write like this, and I do 2 Zoom calls in the afternoon. People want different things. And my daughters call me every day. I'm very close to them. They check up on me, and they take me to the grocery store. I can't drive anymore. They take me to the doctor. So I feel fragile and amazed and grateful and delicate and so privileged to be able to do this with you now. I just feel I'm meant to do, and it's so mysterious to me, really, like this. And I'm touched by your communal sincerity. That's it. That's the gift to me this way. So let's do a brief sit, like a 2 minute sit this way in silence. So I'm going to what we'll do is this in a brief form is we're going to sit straight and we'll fold our hands in prayer and we'll bow. The Zen master Shinru Suzuki says, if ever you get to a place in life where the only thing you can do is bow, you should do it. That's a great saying. As contemplative women, contemplative men, the least and the most we can do is bow in communal gratitude for the gift of being here together like this. Because it's God, seriously. And I'll ring the bell once. And we'll just sit together in silence just for a few minutes. Just for a few minutes. I'll ring the bell again, and we'll all bow in communal gratitude again. It was more than enough. It's always more than enough. And then we'll open it up for a dialogue this way. Okay? So I invite you to sit straight, fold your hands, and bow. Wow.
Thank you so very much, Jim. And we're all deeply moved and touched and grateful. You not only led us in a reflection on this mystical experience of God's love and peace, you helped led us into experiencing it. Um, I don't see any questions, so I'm going to invite people to raise your hand or go into that. Is it the react button? You can raise your hand.
I want to share something too about questions here,
All
okay?
right, Jim, go ahead.
I want to share something. It's when we talk like this, it's endlessly evocative.
Hmm.
So it's almost as you listen to it, if you're so inclined, like what struck you about this? Or maybe it sheds light on a certain aspect of your life to be seen in this life. So it's all inclusive. That is, whatever it is might come up within you or emerge within you is relevant that you'd want to share to dialogue about it. And so just leave it very open ended that way.
Very good. So why don't we start with Tom and then Ryan, and then we'll hear from some women. Okay.
Oh man, thank you so much, Jim. This was just amazing. You are like drinking from a fire hose for sure. Um, so I was like praying this morning about um, really hearing Jesus, really hearing the Spirit talk to me. And you were talking about the inner stance, that the inner receptivity. And I guess that's what's resonating with me. And
Yes, yes,
I just want to, also trauma survivor, and the lack of confidence that I'm actually hearing, Jesus instead of like my own.
yes. A few thoughts about it. Yesterday, I was working with another group in meditation with CAC, and we were doing the guidelines like sit still and sit straight and sitting still. And he shared with all of us that he can't sit still because he has Parkinson's disease. He has palsy. And I said to him, just to sit still is a physical act all by itself isn't the relevance. Your deep acceptance of your inability to sit still is the deep stillness that unites you with God. And so I put it this way: it's always closer than close. The sincerity with which we want to hear Jesus' voice, that sincerity is given to us by God, which is the reality of our sincerity. And so then we say, but how do I know that it's really Jesus that I'm hearing, or just me talking to myself? Uh, I put it this way: it's probably some of both. But that's the alchemy of what life is like. Sure, some of it's you. Of course, how could it not be? Yet at the same time, it's never just you, because there's no such thing as just you. The sincerity with which you're asking is the sincerity of Jesus, expressing itself in your sincerity. So it isn't as if over here is the voice of Jesus and over here is mine. And how do I get rid of mine so I can hear Jesus? The voice of Jesus is woven into the sincerity of yourself as you are, as holy. And for me to see it along these lines helps me to see it that way.
Thank you, Jim. Ryan?
Thank you so much for being with us today. I'm always interested by what attracts people to a certain way of life or a manner of being. I'm wondering if you can tell us what within the Catholic tradition or within your own life first attracted you to a cloistered monastery and drew you into the practice of contemplation.
First, and I show this in my memoir. When I grew up, my father was a violent alcoholic. And so I grew up with a lot of, from the age 3 on, just a lot of violence toward me and my mother, my younger siblings. And my mother was a devout Catholic. And she would take us to Mass. A lot of their fighting was over Catholicism, actually. And she would take us to Mass on Sunday. And she asked us to pray to God to give us the strength to get through the things that happen when Daddy gets mad, really when he was drunk. And so because her faith held her together, it drew me, my faith held me together. I can remember at age 7 in the Catholic Church, you make your first Holy Communion. And I would go up and receive the Eucharist. And I would come back with my mother, put the kneeler down, and I would kneel down and put my face in my hands. And because I was inside of the church, I was inside of God. And because I was inside the church, inside of God, I just received the Eucharist. I was inside of God who was inside of me. And I'd hold real, real, real still as the gate of heaven. So from very early, I had, even at age 4, I had moments like that. But a big turning point for me was when I was in the 9th grade. The violence was really terrible. Uh, an instructor in the religion class of the school that I was attending talked about monasteries. I'd never heard of monasteries before. And he talked about Thomas Merton and how he wrote a book called Seven Story Mountain that went on the New York Times bestsellers list, and how he writes all these books. So that day I went to the school library after school, and there was one book in the library by Thomas Merton, The Sign of Jonas, which is a journal that he kept. I opened it up, and on the first page of the journal, I was 14 years old. Merton says this. He says, "As for me, I have but one desire, the desire for solitude, to disappear into the secret of God's face." And at 14 years old, I didn't know what that meant, but something in me did, and I said, "Me too." It is the depth from which he spoke of his desire for God awakened and touched that desire for me this way. And it was like a quickening event for me. I got my own copy of The Sign of Jonas. I read it through the next 4 years of high school. The violence got worse. And over those 4 years, I felt drawn to go to the monastery. And my fantasy was that I could sit with Merton and sit at his feet and he could guide me into God. And so I went and spent 6 years there. And I can't explain it. It just radicalized me. And then when I came out here, I realized what Merton said is true. There are people in the world that God so loved, he sent his only begotten son, but they have no one to help them. And how do I help them? I'm helping you with it now. This is how I help them. You talk from your heart in such a way your heart stirs with it. It's something you already know but tend to forget. And how can you be quietly attentive to the sincerity of your own desire as an echo of God's desire for you? And it's just been my path for me. And when I became a therapist, it merged with trauma. Like, where does trauma and grace touch each other in our life, birth and death? And so for me, that's how it was for me.
Thank you, Jim. So Sue and then James. Go ahead, unmute yourself, Sue. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Jim, I want to thank you so much for your uh, the image that you created with the mother and baby, and then the mother dying uh, with the daughter beside her, and the similarities of the eternality. I do hospice work, and I am deeply touched by that metaphor, thinking the understanding that I live it, and each one of my patients lives it as
That's
well.
exactly right. Yeah.
And the other thing I want to thank you for is your sharing that you are a trauma survivor. I am at this advanced stage. My trauma. I was also the the older child of the alcoholic family, and at this age, some trauma symptoms are coming back up, and I have a terrible time meditating because coughing. My nervous system is very activated, and part of the way it does it is coughing. But you've already answered that. You told me if I could just accept that Christ is with me in that, whether I can be
Right.
or not. That was so helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a thought.
Yeah.
Often these things happen and you do your best and you walk with it. But also, as we get older, like the field of gerontology, as we get older, it brings with it heightened fragilities. And sometimes the vulnerability to trauma can start to resurface. And you might, if you're so inclined to get help if needed, sometimes you don't need help. But there's people who are trained to help with that, like how to process that resurfacing of trauma. But you might
I
not feel the need for that.
Well, I'm a therapist, but I'm looking for a therapist. I've tried a couple that couldn't do
Yeah.
that, but I'm
Yeah.
looking for one now because of this. But
No.
thank you very much.
Yeah.
I understand
Yeah.
the fragility that comes with age.
Yeah,
Thank you.
exactly.
Thank you,
God bless.
Sue and Jim. James P. and then Liz Ann.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jim, huge fan of yours. Got to meet you at Revision a couple weeks ago, and just
Oh
get
yeah.
to spend a couple moments with you. And yeah,
It was
wonderful
nice.
moment
Yeah.
of finding my teacher there and being able to spend a moment with you. So thank you for that. In the context of nonviolence. I find myself in my work as a director with the Boys and Girls Club, working with lots of families that are struggling through so many different things, and I find myself becoming cynical. And I love your story about painting the pig barn. When you brought the can of paint in with Merton, would you please share that story?
Yeah. Sure. There's a big farm at the monastery, and I worked with the calves. I like farm work. I did janitorial work, manual ora et labora, manual labor. And so I worked at the farrowing house where the sows have their litters this way, and I worked out there full time. And it was a one-story building, and I was going to paint it. I thought it would be good to paint it, like get rollers and paint the pig barn. And and uh, And so I was telling Thomas Merton this. I was painting the pig barn. And Merton said, "Oh, what color?" I said, "Blue." He said, "In honor of our Blessed Mother?" I said, "No." I said, "It's the only color they had." And he picked up that I laughed. And he said, "The trouble is you're cynical. There's a kind of a depth of devotional sincerity that you would paint it blue in honor of Mary as a kind of mystical sensitivity. So the very fact you thought that was silly. And I took that to heart. This way. There's a kind of a deeply mature, like Saint Therese of Lisieux. There's a kind of deeply mature childlike transparency, like a playful transparency about us. That's true. It's one of the lessons I learned from Merton. Yeah.
Well, that's beautiful. Thank you, Jim. Thanks, Jim P., for asking Jim to tell us that. Lizanne.
Well, thank you so much for today. So many profoundly, profoundly beautiful things. And I'm so glad that this is recorded because I'm going to be listening to it over and over again. One of the things that jumped out at me among all the things that you said was, I quote you, be Christ to yourself.
Yeah.
I just love that. I've never heard that before, and I need that so much because I have a lot of negative voices that will come out. And yeah, so I just love that. Thank you so much for that. And I want
Yeah.
to can't think of the right word. There seems to be a connection to that, to the painting behind you, because I was transfixed by that painting of Jesus looking at a person. And I was sort of imagining during,
This over
yes,
here.
yeah. I don't know if it's an icon or it's a painting someone did for you.
Let me tell you about this painting. This is a very interesting painting. See this painting?
Oh, I just love it.
There's a church, Barnabas of the Desert. It's where I first gave this talk I shared with you maybe 10 years ago. And there was a woman there in the parish, and she raised a severely disabled granddaughter, physically, mentally disabled. It really transformed her life. And she painted this painting. It says in the Gospels that Jesus went out into the desert and was tempted by Satan.
Oh,
So
yeah.
this is Jesus in the desert. This is Satan coming up
Oh,
out of the
that's
dark.
Satan.
Hey, Satan, and Jesus is touching Satan's heart.
Oh,
Isn't that something?
oh.
Ugh.
Yeah, no, that is really something. That's not what I was imagining with it at all, but I mean,
Yeah,
probably
I
some of
love
the
that.
shooting Thank you so much. No, that's just beautiful.
Yeah. And I think too, it says, when Jesus died, he descended into hell for 3 days. And Malcolm Guite, the poet, he said he was in hell for 3 days because he was looking for Judas. And I want to go even deeper. He was looking for Satan, because Satan is the presence of God. See, Satan is an angel. There's the uncreated persons of the Trinity and created persons. Some are corporeal with bodies, that's us, and angelic persons, this. But who we are is God's manifested presence this way. It raises a deep question about evil, about this. It's very mysterious. And I want to say this too I'd often say this in therapy. We catch ourselves being punitive toward the part of us that needs to be loved the most. People in therapy, they'll get very vulnerable about whatever self-cutting or whatever they're doing. And they'll say, I hate this about myself. And we catch ourselves being punitive toward the very part that needs to be loved the most. So how to be endlessly tender-hearted toward the part is it, because these wounded patterns are internalized survival patterns formed in trauma and abandonment. They're ritualized survival patterns. And so to be endlessly, we take ourselves to task for it in a loving way. I think there's a better way to go about doing this. But I understand why you're doing it and where it came from. And I'm with you and I walk with you and I accept it. And then we try to do that with society too, because each of us is a unique edition of the universal story of being a human being. Everyone is an infinitely love broken person. And we try to walk with them in their broken. This is nonviolence. We walk with them in their brokenness, meet them in their brokenness, see them in their brokenness. And so when they can see that they're seen, the very fact they can see that they're seen, that event is that part in them that's not broken. Because if it was just brokenness, they couldn't see it. Sometimes you get the feeling you're in the presence of someone who's more present to you than you are. And you have faith in their faith in you. And it arcs over into a faith in yourself. Like it arcs over and it catches fire. And that's how it's handed on from one person to another this way. So anyway, that's the painting. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you so much.
Susan, and then Sharon and David. Did you want to ask something, Susan? You're muted.
Is it my turn?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought I was emailing the question, but I mean, anyway, I came to this really in need of a great deal of what I got. And so, in a sense, my question is what I came with. And I've gotten a lot from dear Jim, who I remember from convent in Ventura many retreats ago, and Yermo. It was a long time ago. Anyway, I'm working with a very anxious young woman who is a detainee, a migrant from Jamaica, and she's my friend now. And her family is in South Carolina, and they're at risk of eviction. I'm trying to make this short. Very, very fond of her. I sent, with other friends' help, a tidy sum of two money orders, the first one seemingly having been rejected and on the way back. So I sent another one, and anyway, the upshot is that both have turned out to be fraudulently cashed, and we're done sending money orders. And meanwhile, her mother had died, and her partner, watching three small children, has had a stroke, and he's back in the home now. So it's a very, very distraught situation just because she's an immigrant from Jamaica. And I care deeply for her. And this isn't about me. It's that I can't do anything more except just be by her in messages and phone calls. I can't send more money. And it may be that her children will come in a home or shelter, and I know better than to go in the future. So I try to send her hopeful messages. But then there's a part of me, besides my obvious sadness, I just feel so, my faith is just shattered. This happened yesterday. I feel better today, but then you reminded me of Judas and Peter at the Last Supper, and evil exists. But here we're trying to do something good. And I expected the reward would be that we would accomplish helping. And instead, not so much.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yes, that's a big thing, really. I think sometimes we pretend that we care less than we do. Because if we let ourselves care as much as we really do at the feeling level, the suffering would sweep us away. There's so much suffering. And this is the view from the cross. This is the view from the cross when you think about it. I share this story that Maureen and I, we were therapists together. We were going to our therapy practice. And we were stopped at a red light. And there was a street person there. All her belongings were stacked up in a grocery cart. And she was going from car to car with a styrofoam cup begging for money. And when she got to our car, Maureen put her window down and gave her $1. When she reached out to take the dollar, we saw that she had no hands. On her shortened arms, she had two deformed little fingers. And she reached out and she said, "Thank you." And Maureen said, "You're welcome." And we drove on. And Maureen said, "Have a good day." The woman said, "You too." We drove on and Maureen said, "I wonder what kind of good day you have when you have no home and you have no hands." She said, and I said, "That's exactly right." And I said, "Just think, she's one of thousands and thousands of thousands of people that are living that way all over the world. And a lot of them are going to die that way. A lot. They're dying that way right now, all over the world." And then I realized we were going to see traumatized people in therapy. They had a home and they had hands, but in PTSD, they couldn't abide themselves. And I found myself slipping away. I was getting in touch with too much suffering at once. And they were counting on me to be there for them. And so I had to reclaim a presence, like a presence that transcends the suffering, but is unexplainably present in it. And I had to reinstate myself in that deeper presence to be present to the suffering this way as the artistry of healing. So this is something, especially we see how limited we are in situations like this. You know what I mean? We're just, but uh, anyway, that's it. Yeah.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe Sharon and Dave, and then the last one could be Joan. There you are.
Okay, there we go. Hi, Jim. Sharon and David here. Um, always, always a gift to be able to listen to you and a soothing, calming, healing kind of presence that just kind of overtakes us or takes me. But today, it's exceptionally good to hear you. This morning, I learned that my sister, who is 4 years younger than me, has terminal cancer, probably. She has a bad heart, and the test they saw this morning shows she has a massive growth in the colon, and it's almost blocking the colon, and surgery is not an option because of her bad heart. So it's probably terminal. So it was healing and comforting for me to hear you talk about your experience with Maureen, and I've heard you talk about it before, but as you talk about that, it's like, okay, I can join that. So I just wanted to say thank you for sharing that again. It was a gift today, so thank you.
You know, I put this in the memoir. She died in in-house hospice. Right, her ashes are right there on the table, right next to them every morning. And she was dying, and I was sitting next to her on the bed, and I think she could hear me. Inside of myself, I said to her, I said, "You know what? I'm sitting here like this. I remember when I entered the monastery at 18 years old, an old lay brother died. It's the first time I ever saw a dead person, I remember. And that evening, Merton gave a talk to the novices. He said, it's very helpful to remember that when we die, we don't go anywhere when we die. We don't orbit the earth a few times and take off and go to God
Right.
some far. In God, we live and move and have our being. We're living our life in the vast interiority of God. All the angels are here, the saints are here, all those are eternally in God. We're all together in the interiority of God. In ego consciousness, we don't see that. But in deep meditative states, you can see the dead. That is, in deep meditative state, you can realize your deathless oneness with you in love. We're all woven into each other eternally forever. It's a good news, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Joan, maybe the last question. Thanks.
Am I?
Yep, you're on.
Okay. Well, Jim, I join with everybody else with just deep gratitude for all that you've shared with us today. And I've followed your podcasts and so on. I'm part of a prison ministry that goes every week for 2 hours to a minimum security men's prison. And the men that we've gotten to know, I would say most of them are suffering from unhealed trauma, probably led them to do whatever they did that got them there. And they have a very hard time believing that God loves them and that God forgives them. And but at the same time, they tell stories that are just deeply moving to all of us. And I'm wondering if does trauma heal itself? Does, are listening to them and spending time with them do anything? I mean, the prison is not, I mean, they offer classes and so on, but they're not really dealing with the men's trauma.
Yeah, here's my sense of it.
Thanks,
What do you
Joan.
have for that?
Yeah. Here's my thought. If you're interested, there's a brother Dennis and a sister Greta, and they founded what they call the Community of Divine Love, and it's full-time prison ministry within prison alcoholics. So they've been at it for years. It's their ministry, and he wrote a book called Oblivion about his own addiction, imprisonment, and so on. So they're good people to connect with. They're such really soulful people this way. But here's my thought about prison this way. Trauma doesn't heal. Everyone's different. Everyone's different. And people get through it in different ways, so they don't get through it in different ways. But a lot of them are not getting, and a lot of them won't get the help that they would need to completely heal from the trauma. Some will. Some will have enough ego strength to find their way out of it. But a lot of them won't. And not only that, the prison environment itself is traumatizing. So not only does it not help, but so so your time with them is like a ray of sunshine. It's a light, and you might feel it doesn't do much to change things in the big picture. In a certain sense, you're right, but there's no way to understand what it might mean to them that you spend time with them, because the very fact you spend time with them, you're bearing witness to them that they matter. They matter. And if they can take that to heart, they can arc over and get in touch with like a footing within themselves. Could be starting to get their balance and find their way into a better place. So I know of that work. So it's a calling. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Joan. Jim, we're toward the end of our time, and we're all just so grateful and moved for you. You took us to a deep place and helped us in many ways. In my notes, as so many have said, I heard you say, so I guess I want to ask as a last question, any other tips, suggestions on the basic theme that I heard you say? I wrote down that you said our task is the part of us that is tender-hearted to be kind and tender-hearted to the part of us that doesn't get it. In other words, be Christ to ourselves. And then we can assume the inner stance that offers the least resistance to be overtaken by the oceanic love of God. Yeah. It's kind of a double negative almost there. So you're calling us to the inner stance, not to resist being loved infinitely by God. And then I put that in the mix. You said that's the essence of nonviolence. There's no one to be violenced against, beginning with ourselves. We no longer need to be violent toward ourselves and others. And you ended by walking through meditation and sincerity and listening and intercession and then contemplation, just wordless resting in God who's resting in us. As I think methods for the ordinary inner stance, do you have any last words for us as we go today about maintaining that inner stance as a key. I'm framing all of this as Gandhian, Kingian, of course, gospel nonviolence. To the least resistance to the oceanic love of God, that we might really deepen in nonviolence and become channels of God's oceanic nonviolent love. Any last thoughts?
I'll offer this as a last thought. Insofar as you're on this path, which gives meaning to your being together. Dan Walsh once said, "To belong to a contemplative community bears witness that you're worth what the community is gathered for." You belong here. And how has it come to pass that you become the man or woman who's capable about being sensitive to such things at the level you are now? And is it not also true it wasn't always like this for you? In years gone by, it wasn't like this for you. You're on a path not of your own making, perhaps with a lot of cul-de-sacs along the way. You're stumbling this way and that, this way and that. And here we are. And so the path that lies ahead is more of the same. This is why we meet regularly. This is why you meet regularly. It's an ongoing community that you support one another in the unfolding intimacy of this path and bearing witness to each other and be there for each other. This way.
Thank you.
Yeah. Like anything else I can't answer. In other words, here's how I put it. There's no answer. It's not an answer, but there is a response. The response is to respond and being sincerely present to the sincerity of the question. And then we meet each other. And that's it. And I also think when I read the words of Jesus or the mystics, their deathless presence shines out as we sit with their words. Like God, we can hear God speaking to us in their deathless voice, calling us along the path. And here we are today. Thomas Merton once said that in the Catholic tradition, next time you're about to receive the Eucharist, realize someone's taking perfectly good care of you. And I end by saying this. The fact that we were all able to be together like this today gives witness that someone's taking perfectly good care of us. Go figure. We couldn't have planned this if we tried. Seriously.
Amen. That's lovely, Jim. Well,
Praise the
again,
Lord.
everyone, please join me in giving a warm, rousing applause to thank our friend, Dr. Jim Finley, for being with us. And I hope you'll come again, Jim. And I invite you again, as I said, to do the podcast with me sometime next year. And I'm going to call you and Zoom with you soon. So brace yourself.
Okay.
I wanted to just give a little commercial update that the next program will be with Sister Elizabeth Johnson, all about Christmas, on Saturday, December 20th. And like you, Jim, she was talking about the depths of prayer and the mystical life. But she used the word incarnation a lot. So I've asked her to talk about that. And so she said she wanted to have a conversation. So we're going to have a conversation on the incarnation of the God of peace and universal love and what that means for all of us and the incarnation in us. And please join us and tell your friends. Please also keep on supporting the Beatitude Center. Tell your friends about it and support the Nonviolent Jesus podcast if you can, and tell folks about it. We've recorded tons coming up for the rest of the year with wonderful, wonderful people and teachers. This week I'll be talking with Andrew Young and Congressman Jamie Raskin, friends of mine.
Oh.
And it's just incredible, one after the other. So, but even having Joan Baez, the best way to help promote it is word of mouth and social media, and tell all your church connections about the ministry of the Beatitude Center. We're trying to lift up the nonviolence of Jesus in all different kinds of lovely ways. So I thank you for your support. And thank you, dear friend Jim, for sharing so much today. Have a good, restful afternoon, Jim, and everybody. I'm going to turn off the recording. Jim's going to say, going to go, but I'll stay on a few minutes if anybody wants to debrief. So a deep bow to everybody. Let's bow to one another. God bless you all. Go in peace to love and serve the God of peace and one another. Be well. Thanks so much. Bye, Jim.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.